This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Reyes through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicoladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is champion! They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
Porteous says cheated.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hart wrote a commentary that we didn't take World Cup seriously.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. We're recording on Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. I am your host, Jeremiah Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our engineer, Lickett. Later in the show, we'll have an interview with MLS Season Pass commentator Ross Smith, who will help us preview the St. Louis City match on Saturday. Well, quite a week the Sounders have had. They started with an absolutely rollicking 5-2 win over LAFC, getting goals from 5 different players in all sorts of fun ways, and putting vibes about as high as they've been this year. They then followed that up with an ultra deflating loss to Cruz Azul. It wasn't just how badly they were outplayed. It's that they lost Paul Arriola to a potential season-ending knee injury, and then Jordan Morris to some sort of other muscle injury, combined with Pedro de la Vega's injury in the LAFC game, and suddenly bowing out of the CONCACAF Champions Cup might not be so bad. Now the Sounders need to pick up the pieces. Aaron, how confident are you that they can do that? And don't worry, we'll talk about this game as well, but let's look forward first.
Yeah, I think I'm fairly confident in their ability to weather the storm for a little bit and to do what we've seen them do many times, which is just grit it out. I think I am hopeful. I am optimistic. I don't know whether it's cope or just me choosing to be optimistic or what, but I am reasonably optimistic Jordan's not going to miss that much time. Paul is, I think, probably done for the season. I would be
that's hard
shocked
to escape.
Yeah. And that's going to be difficult, right? Like he's not what you would consider like a key player necessarily, but I think his presence is important to kind of making the whole system work. And so they're going to have to rejigger things a little bit, which, is a little scary after last season, right? When they had to spend half the season finding their sort of identity. And I think Pedro hopefully will be back sooner than later as well. And hopefully this isn't another situation where things sort of drag on all year. But I think the Sounders are in a better place this year just holistically to weather a storm like this than they have been in the past. But I think it's going to be a difficult couple of months. It's a bummer because I think everybody has been so excited by what we've seen so far this season. They were frustrating earlier on, but they just looked a lot better. And then they finally put everything together against LAFC. They looked great for the first 20 minutes or so against Cruz Azul. And then everything just kind of falls apart. So it's a bummer to feel like, probably the best case scenario is we're going back to gritting out results and doing it in a less than exciting way. But if they can actually manage to do that until they get healthy this year and get back to it once they're a little closer to full strength, that's, that'll be a nice change of pace from last season.
I'm maybe a little bit more optimistic that I don't think it's going to be a couple months. I would think it might be more like a few weeks. And the good thing is that the schedule sort of opens up a lot over the next 3 months. The Sounders only have 2 midweek games between now and the start of the Club World Cup, which is June 15th. And those are all league games. So that's a lot of 1 week games. And as long as they can just sort of not have any, as long as their injury situation doesn't get worse, like I'm okay with them playing a couple weeks without these guys. I am intrigued to see how they handled Jordan Morris's injury in particular. He is been their most consistent player this year. Like he's been the player who's played the most in the attack. He has been, I think one of the things that also gives me hope that this is not too serious of an injury is that really ever since he did his second ACL injury, he's been remarkably healthy. He only missed 2 games from injury during that time. And so I would hope that he can get back without too much rehab and that, who knows, maybe we'll find out it was really bad and this will seem hopelessly Pollyanna-ish. But where we sit right now, I'm not freaking out. And the schedule does sort of set up okay. I mean, I'd be a lot more worried if they had somehow managed to get through past Cruz Azul and they were going to be looking at Club America while trying to juggle the lineup with a short roster. So in that sense, maybe it was for the best. I think you may have even said this in the Discord yesterday that maybe once these injuries happen, maybe it was for the best that they didn't advance.
Yeah, I mean, well, I actually said a few days ago I'd rather go out in this round than the next one.
Oh yeah,
but
that's right. Maybe I'm getting confused.
I think during the game I was, especially after Moose scored, I was of the, hey, if we can come back in this situation with these guys, we can win the whole thing with these guys, which in hindsight was, heat of the moment sort of feeling. But maybe we could do that. I don't want to think about what it would have done to the league form if we had continued playing in this competition without the horses. But yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point that the fixture congestion has been unreal, and I think we've kind of internalized it to some degree as a fan base that that's just the way it's going to be this year. Well, it's not going to be that way for a while. It's like this was it. This was a period of time when things were bad and there were a ton of minutes to be eaten up, and so hopefully that does allow them to get Jordan back a little quicker. I'm really hopeful that now that Musovski finally has a goal, that he's maybe going to play with a little more confidence, and so his minutes are not going to be as underwhelming or seeming as just totally incapable of amounting to any kind of production. So that would be nice. And I do think that Jesus Ferreira needs to step it up a bit. I haven't been as down on his play as I think a lot of people have. I think he's looked good. I thought he had a couple of really, really good moments early on when the Sounders were really threatening early in the game last night.
He almost connected he almost connected with Jordan on a cross, or he did connect with Jordan on a cross, and Jordan put it wide, if I remember correctly.
And there were a couple of other just like really nice creative passes that he made to spring attacks, and and I think that's really encouraging. But he's probably going to need to step up the actual production in front of goal. Because I think he's got to be the primary scoring threat now with Jordan out, I would think. So I do think that you are right to be reasonably optimistic, or as optimistic as you can be. But I think that for the optimism to pay off, or to come to fruition, some guys that have not been producing in a bottom line sense are going to have to start doing that more regularly.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that the Sounders have, I think, 14 goals scored so far this year. 8 of those goals are now out with injury. 3 each from Pedro and Jordan, and of course 2 from Arriola. So that's obviously not good. I don't want to make it sound like this is a good situation, but the presence of Jesus Ferreira helps me feel a little bit better. I feel a lot better about Arriola's injury after Paul Rothrock had a good performance, and he looked okay against Cruz Azul too. He made a great move to get in and then set up Ferreira for a chance that was very badly missed, but was probably their best look of the game outside of the goal, where he sets Ferreira up right at the top of the penalty area and he just skies his shot, which, whatever. I guess that happens sometimes. But we definitely need Ferreira to sort of step up and become the player that, they've given him some betting in time, and it's now time to sort of, maybe take the control a little bit more. So I don't know. I'll be very interested to see if the Sounders play him or Musovski at the 9 on Saturday. Nico Moreno actually asked Schmetzer about Ferreira's situation and sort of implying that he hasn't been as productive as they wanted. And I'm sure to some degree that he hasn't been. I would imagine they were hoping that he would be scoring a bit more at this point. But, Schmetzer said that he's been okay with the way he's played. I don't think he's a very different player than Jordan. I think that's one thing that we've seen, is that he's someone who sort of wants to play in the half spaces a lot more. He's not going to go bang in the box with center backs as much as Jordan certainly was willing to. And so he's just fundamentally a different kind of player than Jordan is. So the Sounders are going to have to play a little bit differently around him. Although, I don't know, he might be able to get in behind just as well. So I don't know. We'll see. But I look at the possible lineups for the St. Louis game, and I'm not freaking out. I'm not saying I'm excited about this, but I feel a lot better about the talent they have on the roster right now than the talent they had on the roster at this time last year, when they were still sort of sorting through a lot of injuries.
Yeah, I mean, the guys that they have now are the guys that had to step up, that were missing last year,
right?
And to a large extent, like Jordan, obviously, was healthy, but last year they didn't really turn to Paul Rothrock for help until things had gotten pretty bad. And Georgie was obviously a later season addition.
Rusnak was still hurt at this point was still coming back from injury at this point last year.
Yep. And I think that Rusnak's presence is going to be critical, because there are a lot of guys who are going to have to play a lot of minutes, who want to run at guys and want to create chaos. And I think Rusnak is very good at picking out the moments to take advantage of those runs and settle things down. Like, I think he's just a calming presence that is going to be helpful without having some key players that have been so good early this season. And yeah, I mean, I think Georgie, every game convinces me more and more that nothing we've seen is an illusion. I think that some people are a little over their skis with his potential, but I think he's a real deal, extremely solid MLS player right now, who is such an X factor, right? Like, even if his production over the course of the season is good rotational guy, the chaos that he causes in games, I think is really valuable with the rest of the players on this team. And Rothrock, aside from the penalty against Cruz Azul, I thought was really good. And that's the second game in a row he's looked like really bright, really promising. And, the penalty was extremely annoying, but I just can't get super mad at an attacking player for giving up a penalty like that, I guess. Like, how often is that going to be an issue? And I think his attacking play is what's more important. And I think that it's pretty clear that his struggles earlier in the year had a lot more to do with injury than any sort of regression or last year being an illusion or anything like that.
I would say I'm at this point with you on that. I think the struggles were more about injuries and form than they were about just not being a very good player, which is, you always start to get a little worried when that happens. But let's talk a little bit about this game. As much as I guess was trying to avoid it, we talked about this after the first leg, and I think we all knew that there was a missed opportunity there. That was a chance for them to get off to a good start and to put a number on the board, and they didn't. They played well. I think they played really well. But I think we saw really how costly it was for them to not get those goals that they probably deserved. If they go into this game up 1-0, certainly up 2-0, I think that they very possibly could have weathered that storm. But Cruz Azul came out. The Sounders were okay for the first 5-10 minutes, maybe, but for the first half, the Sounders were just on their back heels. Cruz Azul dominated possession. Sounders could not really string passes together. Like Brian Schmetzer said, they'd get into a cycle where they defend, and then they'd give the ball away. Defend, and then they'd send a clearance instead of trying to build out. And they just couldn't really build any sort of sustained pressure. And then Arriola goes down towards the end of very close to the end of the first half. And at that point, it's just becomes a real struggle. They were already down 1-0 in the first half, right?
They were, yeah.
And, I would say, yeah, they were down 1-0. I would say I felt okay going into halftime. Like, okay, like, look, they can sort of get their heads back on straight. They can put this together. They can pull out the second half. And I thought they were better, but not much. And I will say, I'll give them credit for this. I thought they, they were getting into tackles. They weren't shying away from that stuff. I didn't think they were overwhelmed. They just couldn't connect passes and they couldn't build out. And they struggled with sort of like the stuff that they've been really good at this year. And ironically, their first really good scoring or their first promising attack in the second half was the ball that got played into Morris in the channel. And then he pulls up out of it and you're like, oh, of course, this is how this goes. But I don't know. I will say that after Musovski scored, which was a nice little a free kick that Rothrock put back into the box, and then I guess it came off maybe Yamar, and Musovski was just kind of in the right place, the right time to finish it. I at that point was okay. This can happen. That came in about the 73rd minute, 74th minute, somewhere around there. And if they get one more goal, they're through. And for the next 10 minutes, I thought they were okay. And then Rothrock commits that penalty, and it's sort of like game over at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that everybody kind of knew when that foul was called, and couldn't have been more obvious. It was obvious in the moment. I think everybody knew that was game over.
Yeah,
I love Stephen Fry. The downsides are worth the upsides and then some, but he is not good at stopping penalties. So he
did not come close to stopping that one.
He did not. He did not. And so you got to hope a guy misses. And I think the book is kind of out that, hey, if you put it on frame, you're probably going to score. And yeah, it's it is what it is. I thought that the key takeaway for me from this game was that the central midfield was the reason the Sounders demolished LAFC, and it was in turn the reason they got demolished in this game. I don't remember Christian having this bad of a game, certainly not since he switched to playing at the 6. Probably not since the year that he had the concussion issues. I think was the last time he had a game this bad. Obed was also pretty bad. I sort of had this realization during the game that I thought Obed made a nice recovery, and I said, oh, this is a nice play by Obed. And I said, I feel like every time I've had that thought in this game, it was them recovering from a mistake they just made. Like even their positives were a result of their negatives. And sometimes it's just like that, like I don't think we are clearly better than LAFC. I don't think that the Sounders midfield is that much better than LAFC's, but they dominated on the day. I'm not convinced Cruz Azul is that much better than the Sounders. I don't think that Cruz Azul's midfield is that much better than the Sounders because I thought they looked pretty good against them in Seattle. But on the day, they were much, much better. And I think that, when you put yourself in a situation like the Sounders did by not scoring at home, where there's a ton of pressure on you to get a goal against the team that probably has at least a slight talent edge and is playing at home at altitude, who are in more of their mid-season form. it's going to be tough. It's going to be really, really tough to do. And I think once that penalty was called, I think the Sounders kind of knew that was game over. And, it can't be easy too when you see two guys who have been so key to your season go out injured. One, I think everybody knew immediately for the season. It's just a really, really tall hill to climb.
Yeah. So I messed up. The penalty actually came was the second goal, but it came almost right. It came right after Morris got hurt, and so that was, I think, also part of what led to the emotional downturn of that. Is they were sort of in it, and then they weren't in it anymore. Musovski did pull them back into it. So I mean, there was a solid 10 minutes where the Sounders were back in this game. Where after Musovski scored, it felt like they might actually, put together something like a comeback. But again, either way, it was not meant to be. I think you can't really argue that the better team moved through. And that's, there's a, that doesn't feel good to say. The Sounders, they had some chances in this one. But they were not the better team. They just weren't. I do think it's very funny that the only MLS team to beat a Liga MX team in this round is the Vancouver Whitecaps, who managed to go to Monterrey and win. They tied 2-2, but they go through on away goals. And really, it wasn't as even close as 2-2 would suggest, because it was like a 97th minute penalty that equalized, but was essentially for naught for Monterrey. So, but right after the Sounders played, Tigres equally demolished Cincinnati, sort of like Cincinnati did jump out to a little bit of a lead in that one, but I mean, they were actually leading at halftime, and then Tigres just poured it on in the second half with 3 goals in the second half. I don't know. It also, I will say that I take some small solace in looking. America ended up beating Chivas pretty roundly. They won 4-0. Chivas got just absolutely demolished, and I just don't think the Sounders were gonna square up to.
I don't think
America.
so. I think that there are, before the Sounders won the Champions League, and even before the Sounders had beaten a Mexican team in the Champions League, a game like this felt so crushing because it just felt like it was insurmountable.
It's never going to
happen. Just never going to happen. And now that the Sounders, I mean, in their run to the CCL title, a lot of people have tried to memory hole this and pretend like they didn't have a difficult run, but they beat León, a Liga MX team, 4-1 on aggregate, and then they beat Pumas 5-2 on aggregate. There are, ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys in terms of the relationship between the leagues and where the Sounders fit into that and everything. But we know that MLS teams can compete with Liga MX teams. We know that the gap isn't that big anymore. And, Cruz Azul is a really, really good team, and the Sounders weren't up to it. And that's okay, because it doesn't feel like they can never get back there again. And now they can focus on the league, which I think, honestly, for me, is the more important thing this year. Like, if you gave me the choice between another Champions League title and an MLS Cup or a Supporters Shield, I would take the league trophy this year, because I think that that's just really important to the health of the club, and the sort of, just like the well-being of the fan base, to have that title chase that goes on all year, rather than continental title.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say that you always want to win whatever tournament you're playing, and I think that's sort of
Sure.
But if you're gonna not win it, going out early is probably the better choice. Like if the Sounders were not going to win this thing, they may, like, if they were going to lose to America, I'd just as well them lose in this round. Now that's a kind of a reductionist way of looking at it, but I will say, if I have to choose these things, I would rather the Sounders compete for the Supporters Shield and play great, entertaining league games than having to sort of slog through all of spring and just sort of hope to be making a run at the second half of the season. Now, of course, the big step is actually going on that run and playing well. And we don't know, like that's a unknown. Are they going to do that? I think they're capable of it. I think that this is a good team. I genuinely like this team. But they need to now go out and do that. And I don't know if I have huge expectations for Saturday against St. Louis. I mean, there are reasons that they might not field their best team. They might sort of just punt this game a little bit and lick their wounds and say, okay, we're going to come back and reset next week. But I don't think they should have to feel like they need to do that. They're going to have 2 days of training in Seattle. We should get we should get some decent run out. Then they have, they don't have anyone getting called up into internet. At least no one in the US or Mexican teams are getting called into the international duty. So they should have a full squad next week or something close to a full squad a week from Saturday. That is. And then again, like it's just one game a week from here on out, basically until we get to the Club World Cup. And that's manageable. Like there's no reason, even if they're missing Paul Arriola for the season, they should be able to figure out how to handle this thing. Reed Baker Whiting has come back. He can help fill in there. Kim Keehee is coming back pretty soon. This roster is going to still be reasonably deep with or without Paul Arriola. Arriola was a very nice piece to have. I don't want to diminish his loss. This is a better team with him on it than without him on it. But I don't think he's the difference between them being able to make a supporter shield run and them not being able to. He might have been the difference between them being able to compete on multiple fronts, but that's
right.
Not an issue anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's not. I also, it probably should be said, I don't know if the Arriola injury changes anything about their strategy, but the Sounders do have a decent amount of cap space, a couple of roster mechanisms, and about 6 weeks to add a player. So if they had a guy that they were looking at, maybe it makes sense to move that timeline up a couple of months.
Right. I mean, and not to be too cold and calculated about this, but the reality is that if Arriola did his ACL, he's out for the year. There's not really any point in pretending like he's going to come back in 6 months. He's not going to. He's going to be out 10 months. There's no reason.
And the first at least 6 months back is not going to be. He's not going to be the same player.
Right. I mean, there's no reason for them not to put him on the season-ending injury list, assuming he's actually done his ACL. And if he hasn't, then who knows? Maybe he can come back. But let's just assume a worst-case scenario. The Sounders need to put him on the season-ending injury list, and they need to they'll be able to replace him with a comparably priced player. And he hit the cap, I think, somewhere around 600,000, 650,000, something like that. You combine that with the 1.2-ish million that they had already. They have something like 1.8 million in cap space that they can go out and find good players with. That's real money. That's real. Those are real assets that they should be able to deploy and help bolster this roster. So I would hope that there should be no excuses. I'm not saying they need to go out and sign those players tomorrow, but there should be new players coming to this team, and they should be getting here before I would think the target should be before the Club World Cup. And then that would give them time if they get here before the Club World Cup, they would also be here for Leagues Cup, and they'd be here for the stretch run of the playoffs. I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be sort of their main goal at this point.
Yeah, it is unfortunate if the timeline got moved up. It's unfortunate that it got moved up for the reasons that it did. But what's the old saying that psychopaths love to say, every crisis is an opportunity, right? Like, I mean, if there's a player that they think is interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I agree. That's a great way of using this particular phrase that got used way too much over the last 5 years, sadly.
Right. Yeah. But it's, there is truth to it, right?
There's absolutely truth to it. And it's a good opportunity to deploy it from the Sounders. And it's, I don't know. I think I definitely know there was an argument going around that I was not as keen to before, which was the best way to, like, the Sounders should just be focused on improving league play, and they shouldn't be too worried about the CONCACAF Champions Cup, in part because the fan base just doesn't impact the fan base as viscerally as the regular season. The regular season is longer. The regular season has more games. It is just the total impact of the regular season is more than the CONCACAF Champions League. And by that token, winning MLS Cup, I think we've seen, has more of a sort of like, this was a successful season vibe to it than CONCACAF Champions League, which we lived through this. We basically had to explain it over and over again. No, this was a good season. We won the biggest trophy ever. And on some level, if you have to spend that much time explaining it, maybe it's not having the impact you need it to. Again, I will say this as someone who has championed the regional championship, for lack of a better term. I'm not quite saying that I was wrong all this time, but I do understand. I think it's a valid point that there's no reason this should be a lost season. And I would hope that the same folks who were poo-pooing the impact of the positive impact will also be like, okay, great. So this doesn't matter. And let's move on to the league play.
Right. Yeah. I would say that there's sort of two distinct eras of the Sounders. I mean, there's more than that, but in this context, there's the Sounders before they won the Champions League, which felt like a culmination, I think, for people who were like day one hardcores.
Yes, absolutely.
And the day one hardcores, a lot of them have turned into less hardcores for one reason or another, myself very much included in that. I don't go to every game like I used to, right? I don't, the Sounders are not the center of my life in ways that they used to be. And that's fine. That's normal. But now you got to get I don't know how many days are in 15 years, but you've got to get a new batch of hardcores in the door, and CCL games are probably not going to be the way that happens. CCL trophies are probably not going to be the way that happens. It's going to be people, getting invested in the league games and hopefully buying season tickets and then becoming the kind of sicko who knows who the players on Antigua are, 5 years from now. Right.
Right.
That's the path that you've got to start getting people on.
Well, and the Sounders have been talking a lot this year. They just had a big press conference last Friday about some of this stuff, which is, a lot of the focus is on how do we get new people in the building and how do we turn casual fans into hardcore fans. And the way to do that, frankly, is by playing fun, exciting soccer, especially at home, and probably during the regular season when you can put a bunch of those results all together. That's a great way to build goodwill with your fans, is to play entertaining soccer at home for a long period of time. And that's not something the Sounders have done a lot of, frankly, since they won CONCACAF Champions Cup. Even when they've been good, they've only, the last 3 seasons, actually, they've been a pretty middling home team. They haven't played a lot of exciting games. And that was part of what was so great about the LAFC match, which was, unlike the Montreal game where you could sort of say, well, they were beating a dead horse, LAFC came to, that was a team that it was a real game. LAFC just advanced to the round, or to the quarterfinals of CONCACAF Champions Cup. That was their first loss in 4 games. They hadn't given up a goal in 4 games. So that was a fun game. And I think there's still reason to be optimistic that this can be a good season. I guess I feel like maybe I'm talking myself into it, but I don't know. I am not as down on this as I feel like I was immediately after the game.
Yeah, I mean, I did not expect to win that game, and so I think the negative feelings about the game were almost entirely wrapped up in the injuries, because I thought that the scoreline flattered Cruz Azul a little bit. I think that the Sounders spent a lot of time under pressure, but they really weren't giving away a lot of great chances.
That's true.
And then things just kind of fell apart at the end, right? The wheels totally came off, and that's going to happen sometimes when you're chasing a result at altitude. And it did. But that's just, that's game state, right? Like you're chasing a goal at altitude without some of your best players. 3 days after a game when you've played 21 games in 7 days or 7 days.
7 games in 21 days. Yeah.
21 games in 7 days would be a lot worse. But yeah, I mean, that's it. It just didn't feel bad in the way like the 6-2 to Santos Laguna did in 2011 or 2012 or whatever it was, right? Where it was just so clearly just from bell to bell being outclassed. It felt like a team that just kind of fell apart at the end for understandable reasons. And, you know, when you look at the roster holistically, like, are the Sounders going to be as much fun while Jordan Morris and Pedro de la Vega are out? Probably not, but they can probably still string together some decent results. And I think it's optimistic but reasonable to think that they're probably going to be back and healthy within a month. And there's still a lot of season left after that. So,
yeah,
you know, still plenty of reason for optimism that this will be a successful and also exciting, entertaining season.
Yeah. I would agree with all of that. Well, that's probably a good place to call this a segment. We're going to send it out to an interview I did with Ross Smith. You may know him as a former Timbers player, and even more frustratingly, a former Timbers announcer, but he was actually a good sport, believe it or not. And he's been working for MLS Season Pass for the last few years, so I'm not going to hold that against him. But he has some good insight into St. Louis City. And then we'll come back, have a few parting words at the end there, and that's it. But yeah, you're listening to No Study at This, and stick around.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes No Study at This, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
It's getting to be that time of year when you need to figure out how to watch Sounders games. If you're an Alliance member, you are getting a free subscription to MLS Season Pass, and you're covered. Similarly, if you're a T-Mobile subscriber, you're also covered. But if you're going to have to pay for one, you may as well give us some of that money. By using the link sounderatheart.com/MLS Season Pass, you'll help support independent media while also getting access to every Sounders game, every other MLS game, MLS 360, and all sorts of other content. Just to make things extra easy, we'll put a link in the show notes too. Thanks. No Study at This, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Welcome back to Nos Ariates. I am joined now by Ross Smith of the MLS Season Pass broadcast team. You may remember Ross from his days, unfortunately, with the Timbers, but now he's working a more neutral job with MLS Season Pass, and he's going to be doing color on today's game or this weekend's game against St. Louis. Welcome to the show, Ross.
How many of your audience, Jeremiah, just tuned out right there when you gave me that introduction?
Right. Well,
that's great.
I'll note that you only. It looks like your time with the Timbers as a player, at least, never overlapped with the Sounders in league play. Although I don't know, did you play in those Open Cup games?
I did. I did. Casey Keller had the best save of his entire career on one of my penalty strikes in the U.S. Open Cup. Yeah, I'm sure he's having a pint somewhere talking about how great a save that was.
Oh
But
yeah,
I did,
for sure.
and my first ever game for the Timbers in a friendly match when Freddie Youngberg was playing was what was called Century Link. Then was a preseason for the Community Shield, which there's a
Oh
picture of me
yeah, I remember that
holding
one.
up the trophy, and I remember at the time thinking, I have no idea what this trophy is, but I'll gladly hold it up.
Yeah, it was funny. They kind of tried to make that a thing for a little while, and it didn't really last too long. But that was a funny little footnote. The history of Sounders soccer was the Community Shield that I think they did like 2 or 3 of them, maybe. But anyway,
Yeah.
well, it's good to have you on. We are getting ready for a game against St. Louis City. This is a place the Sounders have actually had a fair amount of success. They've won the 2 games, the 2 times that they visited there. They closed out the 2023 season with a win, and then last year they got a pretty good 2-1 win that sort of helped turn around their season a little bit. But St. Louis has been an interesting team this year. They're undefeated, albeit with just 1 win. But they haven't given up a goal yet this year. It seems like it's been a pretty solid start for St. Louis.
Yeah, and they've got a manager who knows what it means to keep clean sheets, and Olaf Melberg, former Aston Villa player, Juventus, Swedish international. He was a center back, and I've been impressed, Jeremiah, just how he's been able to get the blueprint, get the backbone sorted. And then what we saw away at LA Galaxy, go in and be a little bit more brave going forward, and they banged 3 goals in. And you started to see what they have to offer going forward and opening things up. So, but I thought it's a brilliant start for him, almost a perfect start. The fact that he just got his base, he got everybody set in the position, and once he got everybody on the same page, then he said, right, we can go and break free a little bit more. And we saw what they did against the Galaxy, 3-0. That's not easy to do away at LA.
It is not easy, although LA does look like they're having some struggles. But still, winning away at LA is never an easy task. And for anyone to do it, frankly, is a good achievement. But St. Louis has been, they've looked as good defensively against everyone, really. They shut out Rapids. I'm currently blanking on who they played in their second game, but this is a team who has been known to be a very press-heavy team, a team who isn't really that interested in possessing the ball, and that seems to be kind of what they've been doing so far. I mean, how would you describe how has Melberg changed what they do?
Yeah, San Diego with being their second game at San Diego.
Yes, yes.
What he's done different to, you would say, Bradley Carnell before was, Bradley Carnell was all about the energy football 2.0, the Red Bulls. Everybody associated Bradley Carnell because of his time with Red Bulls, and it was against the ball, and that was the priority with it all. And Melberg, what he's try to do, while it's still very defensive, I think he's just wanting to get that sorted before he can then open up and then have more emphasis being on the ball. Whereas I think that was Bradley Carnell, that transition, you would say, that was he able to make that step? He didn't get a load of time to be able to show that he could make that step from going against the ball to with the ball and showing the different ideas that he has. I think he would argue that he have the players in there that he was able to then take that next step. And did he have the time? I think he's having something to say with his results at Philadelphia Union now that Bradley Carnell's there. But so Olaf Melberg's done it. It's not a whole lot different, to be honest. Defensively is what we're talking about, the team and how good they've been. The changeover in players has been remarkable. I mean, we're talking about just a whole new list of players, a couple that remain. Leuven, Edouard Leuven is still with the club. Joao Klaus, their top 2 players that were the top 2 players when Bradley Carnell first came in. It's still them, but they've added a whole new cast of players around them. So it'll be interesting, though. So Olaf Melberg, what difference he's going to make? I think we're still waiting to see, because has been pretty much a similar brand of soccer.
So some of those new players that have arrived, even since the Sounders last played St. Louis, Marcel Hartel, Simon Betcher, Giannis Horn, Cedric Teuchert, sorry. These are all difference makers for them that are likely to be starting in this game. What can you tell us about some of these guys? I guess we might as well start with Hartel, who's sort of been expected to be their main offensive force.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring him up, Jeremiah, because I think he's the real key. And what you've seen a big difference from St. Louis when they've tried to expand a little bit more is his role, because the previous two games, Colorado, and certainly in San Diego, he was sitting a lot deeper in the midfield. But then once St. Louis, started to score their goals, he was starting to release more and join in and combine. And whether it's Klaus and Teuchert, or whether it's Simon Betcher in there instead of Klaus, the big difference was Hartel and being able to release and join in. He's a great talent. He's good on the ball. He's good with his runs off the ball, link up play. My one hit on him was that he has to get involved more. He has to do more. And I think we really started to see that against the Galaxy, what he's capable of. I would say, though, to jump to the other side, I think somebody who's gone under the radar is Kessler in the back, the center back. For me, and I think you guys as Sounders have an argument to be made with this. He has been one of the best center backs across 3 games. And I put him in the category of Yeimar. I think Yeimar and of course, Jackson Reagan they're superb. But I think Yeimar is just another level. Well, Kessler's been at that level as well. And I think a big reason as to why they've had the success so far is Kessler coming in, and he was traded with Tim Parker. Tim Parker went to New England, last year, and Kessler was brought in. And Kessler didn't have the greatest of times at New England under Caleb Porter. Kessler has been sensational the last 3 games. He hasn't put a foot wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting how that sometimes works. I mean, here's a relatively young center back who has a lot of good years ahead of him, and ended up being, and it looks like he could end up being a cornerstone piece for St. Louis, and he wasn't really shaping up that way in New England, at least under Caleb Porter. It is always funny how what a fresh start can do for players.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
What do you make of the attack, though, for more broadly beyond Hartel? This is they've been up and down in these first 3 games. They didn't score any goals in the first 2. Came out and scored 3, somewhat helped by set pieces against the Galaxy. Does it feel like it's flowing yet? I know when Melberg came in, one of the things he said was that he wanted this to be a team that can possess a little bit more, but it doesn't seem like early on that's really come to pass yet.
It hasn't. And I think we're all waiting to see with Joao Klaus. I mean, when he first came into the league, I forget what the string of games was of him scoring a goal, but he was tearing the league up right at the start. And everybody was saying, where's this talent come in from? And that was 2 years ago. His first ever game against Austin. I mean, he's a big guy that's gone out to the wing, and he's slashed inside 1v1 and scored such a delicate goal with the outside of his right foot to the far corner, and thinking, wow, a big man with feet, that is tough to come by. But then injuries last year, it tailed off in 23 a bit. I think teams maybe start to figure him out a little bit. But then last year, injuries, just didn't catch on. He had 5 goals last year. You're waiting to see if he's still going to be the main man. And there was a quick little sign of it, LA Galaxy second half. He hit the post, left foot curler. I mean, that for me is still, if this team is really going to take off going forward, he's got to get going. Simon Betcher, I think, is a real interesting one as well. If he is your top striker, if he's getting a run of games, 25 plus games, and you're really playing to his strength, I think he could be a 15-goal man in this league. So you potentially have 2 guys at St. Louis, your number 9s, big guys with good feet that could be 15-plus goal scorers. But I really think you have to play to their strength, and that will be the difference. If they can, and who Melberg picks as his number 1 guy. I think right now it's open to who that will be.
And what are you expecting tactics wise coming into this game? Do you think this is a game where you would imagine that Melberg will press, that he will sort of like force the Sounders, who might be on somewhat tired legs and a little shorthanded after picking up a few injuries in the last couple of games? What would you imagine his approach to this game is?
Yeah, I think exactly that. They have the same shape as what the Sounders have been playing with the three at the back. They've found success with that. I think they would have watched that game last night, and so disappointed with the injuries. Jordan Morris, Paul Arriola, going out to Vega, going out against LAFC. St. Louis have solid results. They're coming off the back of their great win at Galaxy. I expect them to press. I expect them to be high up the pitch, to get in the Sounders' faces and remind them of their travel to Cruz Azul just midweek, just last night, as we're chatting. So I imagine them to really get the tempo going. And I don't know how many Sounders fans have been at that stadium, but I put Portland, I put Seattle at the top 5 in terms of atmospheres. I put St. Louis in there as well. It is something else. And when that crowd gets going as an opposition, you feel as though they're right on top of you. So given their form, given the Sounders, the tiredness of the travel, depleted squad with the injuries, given they're at home, I expect them first 15 minutes to really get after them.
Yeah, so you brought up the atmosphere. That was one other thing I wanted to touch on is the Sounders haven't had to deal with it quite as much because they've been able to be in advantageous positions in the last 2 games there. But what is St. Louis like when it really gets going? I mean, I actually just watched the Onside episode that focused on St. Louis, which I guess features some of the games that you were on the call for. But What is that place like? I mean, what makes it different, I guess, is another way of putting it.
Yeah, they through and through they support their team, and so even when things aren't going well, they're still full voice. It's all a similar atmosphere, and I can't speak to with Seattle, but I know at Portland, it's like familiar faces that you see in the crowds and you're passing by. So it's really a family environment at the same time too. It's when you're going around St. Louis. And it's a game day. It's a game day. It's a match day. You see the colors. Everybody are going to that game. And so you have that. It's on everybody's mind, and it's what matters the most about their day. And I think that carries into that first whistle going. Everybody is desperate for the results. Outside of that, I think they really embrace their culture there, the history of it, the culinary experience in St. Louis. You have to have fried ravioli, from what I understand, when you go there. It's a must. I say all this, Jerry, because I've had a lot of experience going there over the last 2 years, and it just you really want to immerse yourself in what is different than any other soccer environment, because they've embraced that. From the food. I haven't experienced the drinks yet, or although I have post game at a pub across the street, which is phenomenal, and the history of St. Louis soccer is there on the walls. So it comes down to they've just embraced it. They know what they are, and it's a nice, you would say, relationship between the players on the pitch who work their tails off to the fans in the stands who give everything as well.
Awesome. Well, Ross, thank you so much for doing this. Obviously looking forward to a good game, looking forward to a good call from you all. But yeah, anywhere people can follow you other than watching you on Season Pass?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram most. I'm on Twitter, but I don't use it an awful lot. But Instagram, Rossi _ROSSI_20 is I'm on there. So would love that. That opens myself up, though. I know to a lot of Sounders fans coming hard at me.
Oh, don't worry. No, we're nice. We're nice. Don't worry.
All
right. Well, thank you so much for doing
I love
this.
the banter. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeremiah.
All right,
it's great to be on.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I'm Jeremiah Chan. This is Nos Arietes, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Nos Arietes. Hopefully you enjoyed that interview with Ross Smith. I think we're just going to get out of here. We don't really have a whole lot else to do. Aaron and I have been kicking around an idea of another segment that we're still workshopping a little bit. But we are going to do a mailbag episode for March, probably next week, I guess. and we'll have more good stuff throughout the week. But with all that said, thank you to our sponsor, Full Pool Wines, Hacks and Ferments, and I'm Jeremiah Shan signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is No This, part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Remember, you'll never get alone.
We love you. Let's win another one.